Hi friends, it's Jess with our Bipolar. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, just a little bit about me. I have bipolar 1 and I was diagnosed 26 years ago when I was a sophomore in college. And also, I'm a mom. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the time right after you have a baby and, into those first few years and how having bipolar can kind of create some problems or just some things you might not think of. But before we get into that, I will ask you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment, let me know what you think about having kids while having bipolar. So a lot of videos I see are more talking about the pregnancy journey while having bipolar, like if you should take medications, change medications. And a lot of people talk about, whether you should have children at all if you have bipolar or another mental illness. So we're gonna fast forward past all of that. I may do other videos on those topics, but today we're going to talk about once the baby is here. So you have decided to have children, or you got pregnant and then decided to keep going forward with it. You were able to get pregnant. I know I went through an infertility journey. So let's say you're past all of that. And now what happens, or what are some considerations you need to think about if you have bipolar disorder? Now, my husband Brian played a big part in this. He was really my partner. He, took on doing everything I was doing for the baby and more. The biggest consideration I had just in the immediate time after getting home from the hospital with our daughter Pearson was getting sleep. Now, if you have bipolar, you know that sleep is extremely important for staying stable. So what I had to do, and I actually had to plan for this, was we had a night nurse for about 3 or 4 months after Pearson was born. We got very lucky that she started sleeping through the night very early, but in that time before she did, we really did need another person to help. Now you might be thinking, oh, you must be rich. You had all this money to spend on a night nurse. No, we are not rich. This was something that was really important to my psychiatrist, that we saved up enough money so that we could afford a night nurse in the beginning at least. And it was expensive. I mean, this was 9 years ago, so I'm not sure how much it costs now, but we went through a service and we had a night nurse. Her name was Marcia. And she was wonderful, but she was used to going to like mansions, like to actual rich people's homes and taking care of their babies at night. But for me, it was a different story. I had bipolar disorder and I couldn't get up through the night at all. And I actually also was instructed to start wearing earplugs at night so that, the baby crying or any kind of sound wouldn't disturb my sleep. And actually to this day, I still wear earplugs at night because I am a light sleeper and I really need that sleep. So in terms of the night nurse, we had her for about 3 or 4 months, and then Pearson was sleeping mostly through the night. I mean, I think sleeping through the night is considered like 6 hours. But she was doing that, and to save money, we weren't having the night nurse on the weekends. My husband, Brian, he would be kind of like on the night duty. And we had this kind of schedule on the weekends where I would go to bed at 8 o'clock and he would be on kind of like the shift from 8 p.m. until I think it was 4 a.m. And then I would, if I had to, I would get up at 4 a.m. and be on sort of like the day shift. So it was still hard and my sleep was still different, but I was getting enough sleep. And, in doing all of these things, I'll tell you right up front that I actually did not have any bipolar symptoms. I didn't go into depression. I didn't have postpartum depression. I didn't have mania. I didn't have postpartum psychosis like some people do. So it really did work, but it required a lot of planning. Now, another thing I'll say just about having a baby in general, I don't think this applies, it doesn't have to apply to having bipolar disorder or another serious mental illness. It's hard. And I know everyone says that, but this is how I thought of it at the time. When I was much younger, I was a leasing consultant for an apartment building. Sometimes you would have to work 10 days in a row. Once you got to that 10th day, I mean, you were not happy, you were irritable, stressed out, like no one spoke to the coworker who was on their 10-day stretch on that 10th day. So I remember once Pearson was home and it hit day 10. And then I realized that I didn't get a day off the next day. This was forever. And that was a sobering moment for me. I loved my daughter. I love my daughter. She's the biggest joy of my life, but having a very small child is really taxing. And it's something you want to think about before going into it, and especially if you have bipolar disorder. And also keep in mind, I was not the type of person who always wanted to have kids. Honestly, I never thought about having kids until I met Brian, and then something in me switched and I was like, I want to do this with you, and I know that we should do it. But I didn't feel like I was an extremely maternal person. I really wanted to have a child with him, but yeah, that was kind of the extent of it. Okay, so another thing is like you don't know what's going to happen through your pregnancy and when you have the baby. Like for our daughter, she was born, she was under 5 pounds. It didn't have anything to do with me having bipolar. So in the beginning, she had to be fed, I think it was every 2 hours. I was doing formula. I, considered breastfeeding, but because I'm on lithium, my doctor told me I would have to, every time before feeding her, I would have to express milk to get some of the concentration of lithium out and then feed her. And if I tried to do pumping exclusively, my milk supply would probably go down. And it just sounded like really stressful to be able to do this. And I did kind of try in the beginning and quickly moved on to formula. And I'm not here to defend, feeding my daughter formula. She's perfectly healthy, and that's really all that needs to be said. Knowing that she had to be fed so often, that meant through the night as well for the first while. I mean, imagine if I didn't have that night nurse. And I'm not saying everyone has to have a night nurse. It's just that my husband was also working full time. So for him to be getting up every 2 hours in the night by himself, that would be really hard on him as well. It doesn't matter that he doesn't have a mental illness. Let's say you do want to have a child and you have bipolar disorder. If you have a third person, even if it's not a night nurse, it could be your mom or mother-in-law or sister or friend, or if you have that kind of help where you can have almost a live-in person just in the very beginning, I do think that would help immensely. So let's go on to just being with the baby throughout the day. So Brian, I think he had 2 weeks of paternity leave, which is not much. And I actually had 4 months of maternity leave from my job being an editor. I had 4 months because I worked in DC. And in DC, you're able to get 4 months of maternity leave. And most places, it's only 3 months. During that time, I'm on FMLA and you're not getting paid. I mean, you have to take all your sick time and vacation time and take all that time concurrently with your FMLA, and then you'll get paid for as long as you have that time. That's gonna run out eventually, usually. I mean, it ran out for me, but I had so much time built up that it did extend for almost the entire 4 months. I always think about having a baby, like when you're home with the baby in the very beginning. And it's not hard. It's not hard to feed a baby, to hold a baby, change their diaper. Like, these are things I had never done before, just honestly never done. And yeah, it was easy, you know, I could do that. But when you're doing it day after day and you're by yourself and it's just like, it becomes kind of a slog. I mean, you're spending all this time with your child, which is wonderful, and it's an amazing experience, but it's also kind of like drudgery, at least for me. Now, I have friends who, once they went on maternity leave, they just could never leave their child again. They never went back to work. I was fine going back to work. I felt like I needed my own identity. I wasn't just a mom, I was a person, I was Jess, and I felt really good going back to work. For me, those first 5 years, I would say, they were hard. My daughter's 9 now. We have this really close relationship. We have so much fun together. We can talk, we can have real conversations. But when a child is really young, like especially I would say like 3 and younger, it's a different thing. And I hadn't spent a lot of time around kids. It's like, it's fun. You're seeing them change so much at those ages. They're learning about the world. They're, you know, learning to talk, learning to walk. It's an amazing time, but it's also, as a parent, at least for me, was very hard. My child was not independent in any way until at least she was potty trained, which thankfully she did that early. I think she was a little under 2.5 years when she was potty trained, and actually like she was going to this Montessori school like for her daycare, because yes, we had to put her into daycare because Brian and I were both working full time. And they actually told me when they thought she was ready to potty train. So I was very thankful for that because I didn't really know. And then, you know, she's been the kind of kid where she picks up on everything quickly. Like she did the sleep training quickly, potty training, you know, we did like a weekend and then she was potty trained. I was lucky that my child was able to do all these things pretty effortlessly, but that is not a given. I mean, you have no idea what your child is going to be like or how quickly they may pick up on things or be able to sleep through the night. I guess to sum up, I mean, having kids, gosh, it is incredibly hard work and it's a job that never ends. A lot of people, you know, they want to have multiple kids. They want their child to have someone else to play with. And I could see that as being helpful at times because Brian and I are Pearson's playmates and she doesn't have a sibling. Like I could never have had another child just based on how much work is involved, how much stress, just with my mental illness. I know that that would not be a good idea. If you can get through those early stages, yeah, you have a playmate and you have that sibling relationship that they can have, which can be a wonderful thing, but hey, it can also not be. But yeah, I would love to hear any thoughts you have in the comments. Do you have kids? Did you decide against it because it would be just too taxing? Or maybe you just never wanted to have kids and, you know, at one point I put myself firmly in that camp as well. Well, thank you for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.